I've always been a night owl, preferring the solitude and tranquility of the late hours. I often take long walks to clear my head. On this night, I chose a route that took me through the more secluded parts of town, where the street lights were few and far between. It was a quiet night in my small town, the kind of night where the silence is almost palpable and every sound seems to echo through the empty streets. I remember the moon hung low, casting long shadows. I won't forget that, because it was on this night that I first encountered him. As I turned the corner and started going down into one of the streets, I saw him. A man who was walking slowly, almost leisurely, down the middle of the road. He was dressed in an old-fashioned suit complete with a bowler hat, and his hands swung lightly at his side. It was almost cartoony. But what struck me the most wasn't his movements, but his smile. It wasn't a friendly smile, nor was it one of contentment. It was a wide, unsettling grin that stretched from ear to ear, revealing impossibly white teeth. Initially, my reaction was one of curiosity. I was wondering who he was and why he was walking here in the center of the road and at this hour. I continued to watch him, and his smile, it never wavered. It was as if it was there permanently, just etched into his face. Unease began to creep in at this point, but I tried my best to brush it off and continue my walk. As I approached the man, he stopped. His head slowly turned to face me, and our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. I felt a chill running down my spine. I tried to give a polite nod, but my body refused to cooperate at all. His eyes were dark and unblinking. His grin seemed to widen even further. I decided at this point it was better to get as far away from him as possible. So I moved as far as I could to the side of the road, putting as much distance between myself and that eerie figure as I could. As I moved, I noticed that he resumed his walk, still wearing that unsettling smile. It felt like he was coming towards me, so I quickened my pace. But the sound of his footsteps just continued to echo behind me. Same distance, slow and deliberate. Panic began to settle in, so I looked over my shoulder and I saw that he was indeed following me, maintaining the same leisurely pace. What I noticed was, no matter how fast I walked, he never sped up. And yet he never fell behind. The smile remained unwavering, a constant reminder of his presence. Desperate to lose him, I turned down a narrow alleyway, hoping to find an escape. The alley was dark and the walls seemed to close in around me. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I glanced back and saw him at the entrance of the alley, his grin gleaming in the moonlight. My fear turned into sheer terror. I began to run, my footsteps echoing off the walls. I heard his slow, steady pace behind me, relentless and unyielding. No matter how far I ran, that smile was always there, following me, haunting me. Finally, I burst out of the alley and into a well-lit street. I looked around frantically, but the smiling man was nowhere to be seen. Relief washed over me, but that was short-lived. I knew I had to get home, to the safety and comfort of my own space. I made it back to my apartment, locked the door behind me, and tried to calm my racing heart, convincing myself that it was just in my imagination, that he was just a figment of my tired mind. But deep down I knew the truth. That smile, that fucking haunting smile, it was real. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I stepped out, I half expected to see the smiling man walking down the street. I avoided my nightly walks, opting to stay indoors where I felt remotely safe. But even in the safety of my own home, I couldn't escape the memory of that grin, that fucking grin. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a faint tapping on my window. My heart sank as I slowly approached the window, dreading what I might see. With trembling hands, I pulled back the curtain, and there he was, that man with his fucking grin, standing on the sidewalk, looking up at my window. That same fucking unnerving grin. I backed away from my window, my nerves and mind racing. I closed the curtains and tried my best to just tell myself it wasn't happening. But the whole time I stepped further and further away. The tapping that I heard initially started and continued. Tap, 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 tap. The tapping, persistent and rhythmic. I tried my best to ignore it, but I knew I couldn't do that forever. Finally, gathering the last of my courage, I opened up my window and I called out to the man, "What do you want?" He didn't respond, he just stood there smiling. My fear now turning into frustration, I screamed, "Leave me alone!" But it was no use. He remained silent, smiling. Suddenly, he started walking towards my front door. I quickly made sure everything in this apartment was locked and barricaded myself inside. The tapping at the window had stopped at this point and was now knocking on my front door. I backed away, trembling with fear as the knocking grew louder and more insistent. In a moment of clarity, I remembered my phone. With shaky hands, I dialed the police frantically, trying to explain the situation to the dispatcher. They assured me that help was on the way, but every second felt like an eternity. The knocking continued, relentless and terrifying. Just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, the sound of sirens filled the air. The knocking stopped abruptly. I peeked out the window and saw the flashing lights of a police car, officers rushing to my door. I let them in, my heart still pounding. They searched the area, but found no traces of this grinning man. Honestly, despite their reassurances, I knew he was still out there, waiting. Thankfully, the officers stayed with me until morning, but honestly, even their presence couldn't erase the fear that had taken a hold of me. Thankfully, time passed, and I didn't see him. But to this day, I never walk alone at night, and I make sure to keep all my doors and windows securely locked. The memory of that grin haunts my dreams. A chilling reminder that that grinning man is always watching, always waiting for a chance to return. Kia ora whanau. Grimm here. Thank you very much for making it to the end of the video. I know it wasn't a long one, but hey, things happen. This story is quite cool because it's one that I have written myself. I hope you enjoyed it. I kind of rushed the ending a little bit because I couldn't actually figure out how to end it, but hey, shit happens. Well, as always, please remember to like and subscribe. You doing those actions really does help out the channel. It gets people coming in, and more interaction is better for everybody, right? It means I get to make more stories, you guys get to listen to them. Well, I won't drag it out. You hear my chair is creaky, need to oil that shit. But remember, be safe wherever you are. Have an amazing night or day. And as always, I am Grimm. Welcome to my library. And I'm now signing off.